Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, a Sunday morning show for the Hoosier State without all the bad faith, both sides BS. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington today. Happy Independence Day weekend, even if it doesn't necessarily feel happy. That is our one big thing for this week, which I will talk about with my guests in the last third of the show. But for now, let's welcome everybody in. Welcoming back to the show at this time, Michelle Higgs, founder and organizer with the Indiana Rural Summit. Welcome back, Michelle.
Hi, great. Thanks for inviting me.
Always great to have you. One of my favorite people to talk to. Also back on the show, a third-time guest, Michael Potter lives here now. Welcome back, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad I could be here. Yeah, I'm seeing a theme on these holiday weekends. Maybe I'm the holiday weekend host coming up.
My pinch hitter. It's always great to have you, and I appreciate your availability and being here for these. Always a big contributor to our conversations, and I appreciate it. And no stranger to Who's Left, but a first timer here on the weekly show. There's Chelsea McDonnell. Hey, Chelsea.
Good morning. I'm super excited about this conversation. I wish that we were all seeing each other in person because I absolutely adore every single one of you, but I'm happy to see you this morning on camera.
And we are glad to see you, Chelsea. So let's get at it here this morning. There we go. Have some graphics, everybody. So let's start with the headlines today. At the national level, big story out of Texas where flash flooding has killed at least 51 people, including 15 children, and there are still dozens of campers missing from a Christian girls' camp. Really scary, tragic situation down there. Michael, you are an environment guy. Just real quick comment on these floods.
Yeah, it's a scary situation, and whether it's defunding of weather programs and weather satellites out to be able to predict these a little better, the lack of resources to get sirens in communities to help them understand that there's an issue coming, and then as a population, us understanding the environment we live in now, in that the intensity of rains has increased, and it really doesn't matter whether it's global warming or just extra heat from the sun, whatever you want to call it. We don't have to attribute or politicize a cause. It's just a fact that the intensity of weather is increasing, and we need to be aware and design and prepare in our emergency plans for that.
And we are going to come back to that here a little later in this National Stories segment. Also this week, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth halted weapons deliveries to Ukraine as Russians are stepping up missile and drone attacks across the country. Michelle, this is not looking like things are going to be going well for the Ukrainians here for the next little bit.
No, and I think the bigger picture still is, are we an ally to a country that based off of promises that we made, I don't know. I'm holding on to this thing around, the nuclear weapons, right? They had nuclear weapons. They got rid of them on the precept that we would be their protection. And now not only have we left them, but I feel like we are on the wrong side of this now, and we're looking at somebody that is fighting for their freedoms and their democracy, similar to us now. So it really is worrisome how we are being perceived globally now.
Yeah, the Ukrainian people, I think, are going to offer an important guide for Americans going forward and how we deal with corruption, authoritarianism, and oligarchy going forward. A pop culture story that everybody's been following. I have not paid any attention to at all, but this week, rapper Sean Combs, aka Diddy, aka several other things, was convicted on a couple of minor charges in his sex trafficking trial, but was acquitted of the most major charges. Chelsea, you've been paying attention to this thing?
I actually have my husband give me filtered versions of the news surrounding this, because it's been, it's hard when historically we see powerful people come under scrutiny like this, and so often they walk away, and the people who pointed the fingers, just their lives, their careers, everything they had going for them is over. And as my husband's telling me these different people who are taking the stands, I'm going, oh my gosh, like, I hope that these people stay safe. I hope that they have plans in place for when this does not go their way. And I think that millions of other people have said it perfectly. This is why victims don't come forward, especially when we have something like this in our face. Everybody sees it. Think of all of the predators watching this stuff and being almost empowered by it. It's sickening and it's scary.
Yeah, it's gross, and I guess thankfully most predators don't have the financial means to get themselves a really good legal team that Diddy has. Also this week, apparently, the U.S. and China are going to be negotiating over a potential sale of TikTok to a U.S. firm. Michael, is this going to happen, or what? Do you like the TikTok now?
At 50, it's been a struggle to embrace TikTok, but I try, folks. Keep with me. I'll get better every day. And I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that. It certainly was a campaign ploy back before the election. I assume it's something similar in. I'm definitely paying attention more now is watch the stock trading before leading into these things, because now we're seeing every time there is a negotiation, it's really just a market manipulation. And you go back through those older stories of market manipulation, you can pick out key words where it seemed like he said, hey, make your moves now because we're getting this deal done. That sounded like a commercial, but what he was doing, he's telling his friends, go sell or buy because something's about to change in a big way.
Yeah, and abusing the market with inside information is a both parties problem for sure.
Yes.
Also this week, the ceasefire is holding between Israel and Iran, but that hasn't stopped the Israelis from killing over 300 people in Gaza over a course of 2 days. Michelle, is this thing ever going to come to an end? It's terrible.
It needs to. And I think the fact that we cannot name genocide, that we cannot name ethnic cleansing, is part of the problem. Because when you have people trying to access food and getting shot and killed, when you have children being shot and killed, at a certain point, the world has to say this is enough. And again, we're back to where the U.S. could have done something, and we did not. We did not under Biden. We're not under Trump. We have lost our moral compass in this, and I would actually even say, if I had a close friend that was devolving into abusive behavior of their family, I would step in and say, you need to stop. You need help. And I feel like Israel is our close friend, and we're not doing that. And they are not safer in creating enemies in these spaces. And my heart absolutely grieves because I want my Jewish friends safe. I want my Palestinian friends safe. And we do not become safe through violence at all, at all. Even when it's there is no good war or just war theory, in my opinion. There just isn't.
Yeah, and especially if you compare it with the other conflict we just talked about in Ukraine, we've abandoned the victim, and in that conflict and in this conflict, we're 10 toes down behind the aggressor. It really challenges your beliefs about our country, as does the following headline. So, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is fortunately back in this country but still under custody on trumped-up charges, says he was a victim of torture during his time at the CCOT prison down in El Salvador. Chelsea, can we ever make it up to this man?
Oh gosh, of course not. Of course not. No, this man and everybody he's close to is going to live with trauma and PTSD for the rest of their lives over this. And what I want to say is, are any of us surprised? Are any of us surprised that he underwent torture? No, because people are being so incredibly dehumanized. People are able to hurt them and not feel anything, feel a sense of almost pride of this cleansing. Like Michelle just said, this ethnic cleansing. I feel like there's a lesser version of that happening here, where we are the propaganda is feeding this sickness machine. And people are, just like we always have, looking down on different kinds of people with black and brown skin. And it never surprises me. Think of just our past, and just the war crimes that we're just gleefully staring at today. Babies starving to death because of lack of formula. There is a sickness in humans, and we can't make it up to the victims. The only thing that we can do to, make it up to them is to keep speaking up about it and to keep trying to stand between them and the predators. And it's getting increasingly more difficult.
Yeah, and we've got to make this stop, and we've got to make sure it never happens again. Last headline today. As AOC would say, the girls are fighting again. Elon Musk is beefing with President Donald Trump about his one big beautiful bill. Musk is correct in opposing it, but he is right for all the wrong reasons, talking about the big debt that this thing will run up. Are there any good guys in this fight, Michael? Oh, you're on mute there, Mike.
Well,
there you are.
I said to myself, I wouldn't do that. Forget that my mic was off. No, there may be one or two bits of things in the big, beautiful bill that are on the right side of history, but they're few and far between. And yeah, Elon now is the boy who cried wolf, right? Great man. You had your time, your 90 days in the White House to actually make a difference, and you blew it. And so really talking at this point, it's talk. Much like people have pointed out that, nothing he has tried to deliver comes out right. Now, I owned a Tesla. It didn't explode on me. So eventually the cars got right. And they're pretty nice cars, definitely fast. But it's almost like you could see in the car exactly the way he behaves, and it's just that get it to the consumer, and if it doesn't feel so good, they'll get used to it.
We'll figure out the rest later, right? Yeah. Well, so about that, we were talking about the reason for their beef, and that is this one big beautiful bill, as Trump calls it. It's more like a big brutal bill. This thing increases the size of the police state to unfathomable levels, and cuts the social safety net to the bone. So let's be very clear what we're doing here. We are defunding the American people and throwing all of our money at concentration camps and deportation rates. So let's just look at some of the numbers on this thing. So this bill extends the Trump tax cuts from 2017 permanently, and that will cost about $3.7 trillion over 10 years. One of his campaign promises about no taxes on tips or overtime was put into this thing with limits. It's a lot of means testing and hurdles. It's not as straightforward as one would seem. It also raises the standard and state and local tax deductions for taxpayers, and raises the estate tax exemption so the richest among us can pass more of their estates tax-free down to their heirs. Also, on the spending side, we've got an increase in military spending by $153 billion. That's, Mr. Peacetime President Trump, right? And then this is the biggest part of this, I think. $170 billion dedicated to Trump's immigration and deportation goals. Now, $45 billion of that is for what they're calling detention centers. We'll look at one of them in particular coming up here shortly. $30 billion to hire more ICE personnel. $46.5 billion to build the border wall. This thing makes ICE the single largest federal law enforcement agency ever, with an annual average budget of over $37 billion. They intend to spend nearly 20 years worth of detention funding over the next 4 years. This will cost the federal government more than all other federal law enforcement agencies combined. We're talking about the DEA, the FBI, the ATF, the Secret Service, and the U.S. Marshals, with more military expenditure, with more expenditures on ICE than the military expenditures of all but 15 countries. So that makes a domestic deportation force one of the biggest militaries in the world. Think about that. So, how are we paying for all this? Part of it with $1.3 trillion in cuts to healthcare and food programs. Medicaid. Almost 12 million people will lose their health insurance over the next decade. It adds work requirements for able-bodied adults. It says, again, most people on Medicaid are already working. This is adding paperwork requirements to get people stuck in hoops so they aren't able to cash in on benefits they deserve. More frequent eligibility checks, again, paperwork requirements. It cuts to Planned Parenthood, tightens up rules for Medicaid payments to the states, and also cuts food assistance for children and adds work requirements to older adults who are receiving food assistance. Again, these are people who have the hardest time finding a job. So, in summary, and this was a quote I saw from the USA Today summary of this bill, which I will link in the show notes. The quotes that I want to come to are, if your income falls below $58,000, you're likely to lose benefits from programs such as Medicaid, health insurance, marketplaces, SNAP, and student loans. If your income is in the top 1%, you'll have an even greater benefit, saving over $300,000 on your tax bill every year. So, let's see. Michelle.
Yes. So
the economic populist president, Donald Trump, delivering for his working class constituents, right? Oh,
Well,
no, not at all.
I just really want to say, because when people throw out bunches of numbers, it becomes so abstract. And I
Yeah.
always go back to this just to anchor people in reality right now. If we look at these numbers in terms of time, 1,000,000 seconds, right, is equal to approximately 11.5 days. A billion with a B seconds is equal to about 31.7 years. And a trillion seconds is roughly 31,688 years. So we need to just sit for a moment of what we are actually dealing with. The fact that we have a Republican government that champions supposedly fiscal conservatives, what is the word? Conservative, yeah, conservative values, and yet I do not see anything fiscally conservative here. I also see with that whole defense thing, um, when you're wanting to increase military spending by 153 billion with a B, and we already had the largest defense budget, so we're increasing it more, which tells me. And he keeps talking about, Trump talks about doing the, what is it, the Golden Dome or something like that.
Right.
And I'm remembering as a kid listening to Reagan talk about that. He wanted the Star.
It's Star Wars all over again. Yeah.
And part of that comes from, if you destabilize other countries, if you make enemies, then you need to increase your defense because you've made enemies. So we have a whole bunch of what I would call really bad leaders globally that are increasingly making enemies. And it's one of those things that they don't care about the right now. They're planning for retribution that's going to impact my children, my grandchildren. And so that's the thing to me I call out. And then the other is, again, back to the immigration stuff. As bad as, and we're going to talk about the alligator Alcatraz and all that later, but as bad as all of that is, there is an element of this that I feel is still grift. I feel like they're going to plow tons of money into things that we haven't even passed an audit in the Pentagon. So how the heck are we going to know that this money actually did anything? Because all they have to do is show a TV snippet of ICE going into a community, terrorizing that community, taking one or two people. It goes across the airwaves. And they will have said, oh, we've justified millions of dollars in that pursuit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it has to be, we have, as a people, have to defend our neighborhoods, have to defend our neighbors, and have to have complete eyes on this, like follow what is happening. And it really is about amplifying the voices of those most impacted where they're at, so that we're truth telling in what is happening, to push back.
Yeah. $170 billion for ICE for detention and deportation goals. Chelsea, that's some police state shit, right? That's some Gestapo shit. Am I reading that wrong?
No, then I think that you said it perfectly. And I think that we need to call it what it is. They are the Gestapo. They are here to separate families, to, just rain hell upon our communities. Because when you come into a community and you kidnap people, you're torturing an entire segment of people. An entire community is going to grieve and mourn the loss of their neighbors. People with a heart. Let's be real. Not everybody has a heart. But like, think about, let's just break it down to something that everybody can relate to who has kids, right? You take your kids to the park. How do you think your kids are going to react to a bunch of masked men in black coming onto the playground and snatching a family? You know what I mean? Like, we're not even, let's just break it down to these little bits and pieces, right? You're wreaking havoc on a community by doing these things. And so everybody can relate to that, right? You seeing something like that is awful. It's traumatizing. But then let's also bring it back to us, people who are more informed. We know what's going to happen to these people. We know that they are not going to be treated humanely. They are not going to get the food and water that they need and deserve. They are not going to get the medical treatment that they deserve. They are going to be treated like they are less than human. Again, look back at our history. We all know it to be true. So when we see these things, when we hear these things, those of us who are informed, it is an incredibly hard thing to bear because we just know. And this is, it's history repeating itself. I mean, my 16-year-old can see it. He talks to me about it all the time. He's like, how are people not seeing what's happening? How do people not see that we are turning into Nazi Germany? And it's like, if my 16-year-old can see it, what is everybody else's excuse?
Yeah. And it's all heartbreaking and maddening as it is with the massive police state they're building. And again, that kind of funding, you look what they've been up to in Los Angeles, say, over the last month or so, right? This budget allows them to do that in every city in this country. The only thing they need is the personnel, and they're getting more and more money to do it. I can't believe they're finding this many Americans who are willing to sign up to deport their neighbors, but alas, there are. But then, on top of that, you know, they talk about getting this criminal element out of the country. We know it's bull, but they talk about, you know, cleaning up the streets and getting these criminals out of the country to supposedly like make Americans' lives better, but then they're cutting assistance to Americans. So many of these folks count on Medicaid. Michael, if you look at, Josh Hawley in the Senate, was very concerned, said he didn't want any Medicaid cuts. Lots of different House members, they said, I'm going to oppose this thing. People in my district rely on these. They all folded. Is there any spine left in any American politicians, Mike?
Well, again, I think I've talked about this on the show. I'm not a politician until I win, right? So I'm a guy trying to run for office. So no, they don't have any spines. What's going on? I had an opportunity this week to speak with a local politician, and said, because we kind of put him on the spot with the national issue in the big ugly bill, and said, here, you're on film, local stream here. You can turn to the camera and just say, I do not agree with Donald Trump's policies. But as a Republican politician, that man would not say that. It doesn't even affect him. Right? He's local stuff. But you could separate yourself. And I feel like it's such a perfect opportunity for these folks. We know that Donald Trump is going to go away. Assuming he doesn't make himself a dictator, in which we're slowly marching down that path to where he's going to change how many terms, or if he can have an infinite term. But assuming he leaves, he isn't doing this to help the next group of Republicans. He will leave them just like he's leaving, the immigrants, the people of the United States, call it whatever piece that he's destroying with the bill. He will leave them. And so each one of them has an opportunity to distance themselves from him and start their next term. That's the least of it, right? You can help people, but we've seen they're not, really concerned about that. Help yourself, distance yourself from this, and do the right thing. And not a single one has even taken that spin on it, which is mind blowing. They do have a couple people voting against it, right? And that's even, I think, strategic. How many Republicans can we pull off so we can say, well, some Republicans didn't vote for this? That's strategic, just so they can have that byline in the news.
Yeah. It's gross, And yeah, it'd be one thing to even just say, boy, I don't really like this, but I got to vote for it. But so many of them are like willfully cruel and relishing it. And that's going to bring us to our next story, which Michelle has brought to the panel here today. You wanted to talk about this thing they're calling alligator Alcatraz. I'm going to let you lead this discussion. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah. So apparently 5 Democratic state legislators were denied entry to Florida's new immigration detention center deep in the Everglades. It's known as Alligator Alcatraz. Y'all, there is merchandise that they are selling that says alligator. There's a sickness. Chelsea totally named it. There's an absolute sickness. Anyway, according to Florida State Senator Chevron Jones, officials claimed the lawmakers couldn't enter due to safety reasons, and yet they gave no explanation and wouldn't even say whether those same concerns applied to the migrants that they held inside. And when the legislators pressed the Florida Department of Emergency Management for answers, the agency hung up on them. Now, that's disconcerting anyway, because I'm sitting here, and we've seen this happen time and time and time again, where electeds are not allowed entry. So again, I'm sitting here going, when we talk about democracy, Republicans are very quick to go, oh, no, we're a republic. We're a republic. Okay, fine. If you are representative, then you are the people going in and saying, show us what is happening. So we are asking our representatives to go and show us what is happening, and they are being denied. We keep seeing our checks and balances erode. And I'm sorry, but the Republicans have basically handed over all of their responsibility in this. And it's deeply disturbing. The other thing that came up was, according to the Gulf Coast News Now, they said the Department of Homeland Security confirmed to us today that the facility is expected to cost about $450 million per year, with each bed costing $245 per day. Officials say they expect to have 5,000 beds. Again, I go back to, what the hell are we paying for? Like, this makes no sense. Then Governor DeSantis basically is defending the facility and its purpose. And he said he'd like to see other states follow Florida's lead. His quote was, "Don't let Florida be the only state. We've got very red states that should be doing this just as much as Florida is doing, that will increase their numbers." So my question is, what do we do in Indiana to make sure that we are not one of those red states that gets a concentration camp? Because we know that they're already proposing this. So I'm going to throw that back to y'all.
Well, yeah, they already said they're looking at Camp Atterbury to house folks, right? The thing that really gets me is the cost of this thing, right, Michelle? It's a tent. It's a big tent with cages inside of it for human beings in a swamp. How are you going to pay $450 million for a tent? $245 per bed per day? You can get a nice hotel for less than that. It's insane.
I feed about 200 people a day between Monday and Friday, and I know how much that costs. And so, and that they're going to say, well, their medical treatment and all that. You're not giving them medical treatment. You're not asking for insurance for these people. You would let them die there on the floor. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think that we really need to be breaking down and questioning, what exactly are these costs going to? Because it does not cost that much a day to keep one person alive in a tent in a swamp, right? So let's break down every single one of those, and let's talk about what really is going to keeping these people alive. You're not spending that much on these people. That's what hits me, because these are people, these are human beings. And they're saying this, and I know that they don't mean it. They don't mean it. They want to say these numbers like they're going to be taking care of people. You're not going to be taking care of those people. You're going to be taking care of the people associated with this place.
it's going to be one of those where that so much of that money is going to get siphoned off by private prison contractors and subcontractors, and inevitably people who have some sort of financial relationship with either the president or DeSantis or whatever. Michael, I saw this thing's already flooding, right? It's in the path of hurricanes. I'm not even hearing people really talk about the potential human and environmental disaster that this thing is.
Yeah, what's the evacuation plan? I've done work in Alligator Alley. Most of us have family that live Alligator Alley. I am so sorry. Down in Hurricane Alley. And we probably all have friends and family that live in along the East Coast. So we know that they, part of her life is an evacuation plan for hurricane season. And this administration hasn't been very thorough in its work. And so that's kind of like, oh, we didn't think of that. Now people got hurt. And they're like, oh, darn, like they died. Now we got rid of them. And I mean, it's just awful. It is awful to see. I mean, is Donald Trump he's the master developer, right? Is he missing an opportunity? He has some of the best agriculture and construction labor at hand, and he's a master developer. Can't we build an entire town? These people could literally build their own town from nothing if we gave them the space. I don't think they should be rounded up at all, but heck, living in tents in a swamp, that is not livable area. That it's crazy. Absolutely insanity.
I want to take just a second and bring up, because we're talking about living situations and stuff. They were talking about shipping these people off literally in shipping containers, like actual shipping containers. They would put them in there and they could load them on planes or on trains or on. Did you guys see that?
No, but shipping containers on trains definitely sounds ominous. Like,
in any way,
I mean, let's call this thing what it is. It's a concentration camp, and you're talking about putting people in boxcars on trains.
But when you have people like Laura Loomer, who is bragging about, what was it, 65 million that alligators could eat, like they're using social media memes to say the quiet parts out loud. And the sad part is, and I'm going to tie this back into what's happening in Gaza, is that we get desensitized in one area, so that then when we see it happening over here, there's a hesitancy to call it for what it is. And I appreciated, there's been various people that have really tried to bring the story into the context of, do we have a history of concentration camps? And yes, we do. And that we're not at a death camp, like it's not Auschwitz yet. But the thing is, the concentration camps and the rhetoric around ethnic cleansing are pushing that way. And I always think about the way, history rhymes and evil surfaces, but it never looks the same. But C.S. Lewis during World War II often would say that, yes, it never looks the same, but evil is not very creative. And so at the end of the day, you're going to start to see the same patterns. And it's like, what do we do when we say no? And I think even in the idea of, like, we need to watch for the fact that Trump's already making claims of using imprisoned labor, and go, oh, well, instead of being sent to this camp, you can go work at a farm. Well, guess what? Now we already know 13th Amendment makes it so that if you're incarcerated, you're still a slave of the state. As a matter of fact, Indiana still calls people property of the state. So we already have a framework ready in place. And so when I just cannot stress enough, you have a grifter in chief who knows how to make money off of marketing, right? He he peddles in fear mongering. So people think that they're going to be more safe. And really all this is to round people up to basically have slave wages. So at some point, we have to follow this for Indiana and go, are we having farms that are getting slave labor? What do we do about that? Are we getting a concentration camp? What do we do about that? Um, and we have to be very, very clear-eyed on when, we're not going to participate, and what does that mean for each person?
And the
Yeah.
organization needs to happen from the top to the bottom. Like, who's willing to stick their neck out in these instances, right?
Yep.
Because there are a lot of things that people need to be talking about behind the scenes. They don't need to be talking in rooms full of people. They need to be talking to the people that they trust the most,
Yep.
and they need to be organizing and figuring out, what can we accomplish if we do this? And then everybody needs to be organizing, and be careful about the people that you bring into your organizing. Make decisions that you are okay with sticking with, and just move forward and keep learning, keep bringing in information, because if you miss something, you're going to have a misstep and you might have to start over again. We're getting to a point in American history where there needs to be a lot of backdoor conversations about what this looks like, what advocacy and activism look like, and what we're willing to do to stand between the perpetrators and the victims. And I say this with all seriousness, because we all have a role to play. We all do. That this is the Underground Railroad. This is, this is getting serious. It is very serious, and people need to stop being distracted by all the bull crap, the TikTok crap. That is a distraction. It is a distraction. Stay focused, keep organizing.
Yeah, and I'm going to come right back to you on this, Chelsea, because this is the story that you've brought to the table here today. But I just wanted to say two things before that, and that is, at least the Germans had the decency to not put concentration camps on their own soil. They put them in Poland and Hungary and Czechoslovakia, and they didn't sell kitschy merch about it. This thing is alligator Auschwitz, not Alcatraz. So Chelsea, what do we do as Americans, as citizens who resist this thing? And that's what you wanted to talk about here today.
It is. And, the first thing I want to say is that I am so proud of my neighbors and of Americans for showing up as much as they have the last few months. I was really worried after the elections, because even myself, I tend to be a really positive person. I'm very persistent. But after the election, it hit me hard. It hit me real hard. And I looked around me and I saw my activist, advocacy, political friends all getting hit hard too. And I was a little concerned that people would hide from what was going on. And we would see a lot more apathy as long as people were safe in their homes, right? And people surprised me. They surprised me, and they've been showing up, and I think we're going to keep seeing people show up. I think the more that they brutalize us with their words, with their actions, I think the more we're going to show up in force, and that is what I want to keep in my mind and in my heart. So the No Kings protest, they're saying over 5 million of us showed up across at least 2,100 cities, towns. I'm guessing it was a lot more than that. I know of people who were standing out there with their mom and their 16-year-old child at their local courthouse. And, you guys count too. You showed up, and that's what matters. Like, you let people in your area know that they are not alone. They might not be ready to stand with you just yet, but when you show up, it reminds them that there is a place for them in the solution, on the right side of history. So showing up is just amazing. And so I do want to kind of take a second and talk about that No Kings protest and ask you guys what your experience was. Did you go to a protest? What did it look like for you? Here in Muncie, when I got to the protest, they were counting about 750, but I went all the way around the protest recording. And by the time I got back to the beginning of it, there had to have been 400 more people there. So we were looking at a crowd size of about 1,000. And it was really, really great. Lots of support from the cars passing by, only a couple people who were there to stir up crap. And it remained peaceful regardless of their, disturbance.
Yeah, Michelle and I were both at the one here in Bloomington at the courthouse, and I recorded the whole thing and put video up for it. So I wasn't like out in the crowd. I sort of parked in one spot right there, but we had somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. I would say I'm not quite good at crowd estimation, but I've seen estimates in those ranges. Now, Michelle, you were working a table for Organizing Indiana, or was it for the rural?
It was for Organizing Indiana, and organizingindiana.org. And we were launching the Summer of Solidarity campaign, which was basically advocating for joy as resistance. And what was very interesting was two young men came up, and I could kind of tell like they were mocking it a little bit. And as far as the overall protest.
Yeah.
And but one of them I started talking with, and I said, and he's like, so tell me about this joy is resistance thing. I said, well, here's the thing. What brings you joy? What genuinely brings you joy and reminds you that you are human? And he paused for a moment. I could see just like as I just left space for him to imagine and think about that, everything shifted. His whole countenance shifted. And then I said, whatever that is, I said, bring 2 or 3 people with you in that. That's what you have to do. That's what we're doing. We have to reclaim our humanity because everything is moving us to become monsters. And that is not who we are. And what was beautiful was I felt like they left that booth because we were right kind of at an entrance point, and they left actually more curious and engaged than they were to observe and make fun of or be outside of that. And so, to me, and keep in mind, when I was setting up that booth that morning, I put down the sign that said joy is resistance right as I heard that the Minnesota legislators were murdered. And I had to stop and cry. And I'm looking at this going, this feels horribly anemic. Like, why, how can this even be powerful? And yet I look at him going, because joy is resistance. It doesn't negate the truth. It makes it hard. And finding light in those dark places is hard. But I am absolutely convinced that across Indiana, we have a lot of people who have light, and how they choose to show up in this moment, whether it be a book study, hiking with friends, having neighborhood conversations around coffee, is going to shift the whole tenor of what is happening. And so we use the symbols sunflower, again, kind of in anchoring us to Ukraine in that regard. But here's also the beautiful thing about reclaiming the American flag, using the sunflower. I had somebody say, you know what? I was driving behind a Jeep. They had a flag and a sunflower on their wheel thing. And he goes, I know they're not part of the Summer of Solidarity, but it reminded me that I am. He goes, that was brilliant, because I needed that moment to go, yes, I am part of something bigger. And so, yeah.
A couple things. Chelsea sort of hinted at this. Is getting together on a Saturday in a public place and chanting and marching and staying on the sidewalk gonna be sufficient when we're dealing with an actual fascist police state anymore at this point?
Yes.
We're going to have to get a little bit more uncomfortable than that, aren't we?
Yeah. I want you to think about religion, right? Like, so Christianity, for example, because that's the big one here in America, right? Where it's always around us. So I want you to think about how many times you've seen church groups and you've seen youth groups. And like here locally, we have some church groups that literally get together at restaurants and they're preaching like on Sunday mornings, right? So, and sometimes I look at them, and I'm not a religious person, but I look at them and I go, man, like it must feel nice to feel so like grounded in something, like so just your faith shines through so much that you're not afraid to tell the world. You're not afraid to be in any public situation. And I think that that's kind of a role that we need to take on. Like they're, in a lot of ways, they're taking on like this righteous role, right? By like sharing the word of God with all of us in all of these open public spaces. That's what we need to do. Because guess what? We're righteous in our message too. Our message is to do the right thing. Love people, treat people with kindness, treat them the way that you would want to be treated. I am righteous in that. I know that that is the right thing. I know that treating people like they are my family and not like they are a stranger is the righteous way. And that's what Jesus said, right? I'm not a religious woman, but I know that. And so I feel like we need to take on that role, that we belong in every public space, celebrating what we know to be right. We know that joy and acceptance and love is the right way. And so I say, yes, get out there and love each other and celebrate loudly with joy that we are still standing and we're still convinced that we understand the righteous path on the right side of history. And we can bring people with us because there are going to be other people around us that are going, wow, like I really appreciate their conviction, and they're going to be like, okay, I can do this too. So, Michelle, I really appreciate what you shared about that. The joy is resistance, because it truly is. They want us to hide. They want us to be so broken that we can't even help ourselves. And I say, fuck that.
Yeah.
How many times, Michelle, talking to the two young men on their way in, we had that in Franklin, Indiana, with a couple guys coming over, and they were young. I would say 20 max. We may have asked maybe 21. They had their red MAGA hats on. Came over to kind of. They were not in your face kind of guys. They were definitely more introverted kind of people in general. So they didn't come over yelling or with aggression, but just they knew they were poking the bear. But then they got into conversations, and it's just like, and I asked, like, well, that's a bold statement. What are you doing today? And you talk to them, and I think, and they kind of hung around on our side of the street and didn't really go back to the counter protest side of the street because we're in line with the Christian religion. How is media making it that, say, the left is at odds with Christian religion when we want the best for all people and to treat people like we want to be treated and treat brown people like who Jesus was the same as white people. I don't know how those two ended up I do generally know how they ended up at odds, but they shouldn't be at odds. And so the protest, to go back to the question, I think it is working. I was in Indianapolis, and I got there. I got to host my first protest, or more of a sit-in or rally. We did it at a park, and so the local small town was pretty upset about that, and why you got to bring the kids into it. Now, we were all the way out at the road, so we were like nearly probably 200 to 400 meters from the playground equipment, or really even we're in probably 100 meters from where people get out of their cars. So where we were visible was on a state highway. If people were coming and going from the park, it was kind of a rainy morning that morning of the No Kings. So there was no events at the park, no one else but us there when we arrived. And then, but we got a lot of traffic going up and down. It was a very busy road that we were on, and a lot of horn honks. Then I went to Indianapolis, and I was about an hour into that when I got there, and I was able to park pretty close. So when I opened my door in Indianapolis, I could hear the chanting reverberating off the buildings, and it was chill inducing. I'm getting the chills talking about it. It was like, your favorite concert or I mean, I guess a concert's the best thing when everyone, the artist stops singing and the whole crowd is singing, and you can not only hear the crowd, but you can feel the crowd, and you all in unison. It was awe-inspiring. It was amazing.
Why aren't we doing that more? Like, seriously, we need to show up in groups and sing protest songs.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, when I hear people sing together, it fills me with so much joy and connection, because music does that for us. And let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
by hosting these, I'll just say real quick here, by hosting these, I had coworkers show up. I had my daughter show up. My wife and I were both there. You have friends show up, and it's another moment of connection. Some of them, you invited. Some of them, it's their first time. And you make that connection because, a little bit of getting involved in politics and being on a show called Who's Left. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but, friends have kind of distanced themselves. Now, at 50, you don't talk to people every day, maybe like you used to, but there's definitely people I feel like I don't hear from as much. And then to have people show up, and maybe those people you want to reconnect with, or they're new people, they show up at these rallies, and it tells you you're doing the right thing. I mean, I'm probably doing it anyway. I'm fighting for the people. It's what I do. And it's great to be able to have a little bit of time and energy to help in that way.
Yeah, we got to stay out there. We got to stay visible. We got to turn this up. We're going to have to disrupt things. Though I will say to one of the things that Chelsea said, watch out for new people in your groups that maybe encourage you to be violent. That's a Fed. Do not listen to these people. So last thing on before we turn to the state stories, Michael, we have to do all of this organizing and fighting back and pushing against this authoritarian scourge amidst climate collapse. So I guess, how do we navigate all of these things together?
Slowly and patiently, with a sense of urgency. I've said that a few times. I got that from my brothers and sisters in environmental emergency response. When we're trying to clean up a pipeline or a train wreck, you can't fix it all in one day. You got to step forward one piece at a time, keep at it with persistence, and have that urgency that we want to get this done. We don't want to protest forever. We want to have an end goal in mind. And so, I don't talk a lot about my involvement with the environment as an environmental consultant. And it's funny because people, they'll ask me after a personal rally or event that we hold, and like, you didn't even talk about environment, and that's like your thing. Like, yeah, we got a lot of problems, and maybe I find the environment's the base that holds it all, but other people don't think about it that way. But from all the topics we've talked about thus far, like the detention center in Florida, that's a permitted endeavor to fill in the swamp, build in the swamp, have a road in the swamp. That the Everglades provide an essential buffer for the hurricane season to the mainland. And why do we have this flooding in Florida all the time? Well, when you take over the barrier islands on the East Coast, those are designed. Their literal name is barrier. They're designed to be a barrier to the mainland, to protect the mainland from those coastal surges. Then you have the Everglades on the south down there. There are all these environmental components that are at the base of what we do that are being eroded. And through the new bill that passed, they are ending, Biden era environmental programs that were to help us move forward. Say grants to get schools solar power, right? And so if the schools did not get this grant and they get in on it, now that's canceled. and they had an opportunity to do a couple of things for themselves. They put solar on their building, which replaces their petroleum power, and it makes them a little more independent because they have their power source right at their spot. And it provides an air quality boost. And they now are saving on power bills, right? There are so many pieces. So that money that was going to their power bill, some of that's going back to the loan if they had to take a loan, a low interest loan. But again, a lot of that was grant money. So there's cost savings, there's environmental protection, there is a personal benefit. And these continue to be eroded by these new bills. We see it in our state. So they really want petroleum power back and drill. Petroleum is not going anywhere. It's going to be a major power source for the United States for a long, long time, no matter how many nuclear reactors we think we're going to build. Petroleum, and if it's not our main source of power, it will be a main source of materials for us. I'm sitting here using a camera on my phone, so my phone case, the cord, the stand it's on, the computer that's behind it, that's all petroleum product, right? It's not going anywhere. So we can supplement our power needs with solar, wind, other things, and not have to rely on, polluting our lands more. Data centers, another one. They're going in, it's like, oh, they can self-power with generators. Well, now we're just, again, adding a bunch of fossil fuel driven power generation. And maybe that is the answer for backup and long term. But again, why not put solar? Why not use wind? Why cancel these? And the answer to that, and I'll let you all comment on this, is the answer to that is money. Right? It's the money and the subsidies to the petroleum companies. Because we could incorporate everything to make our lives better, and we're allowing the bribery from the petroleum companies to drive our environmental standards.
I have a grand conspiracy theory that the people in fossil fuels and big tech and just all the folks who have the money now, they know damn well climate disaster is coming. And if anything, they're stepping their foot on the gas to make it happen faster, so they have all the resources in their possession, in their control, when things completely go to shit. That's my big conspiracy theory.
Well, it appears to be like our current national administration. It's just greed, because they're not thinking about how, well, what am I going to do either for myself or to help others when it collapses? It's what can I get my hands on right now for the sake of saying I have my hands on it. That's all they want, is to say they're at the top of the pyramid, or that's what it appears, because Bezos and Musk, what are they doing? They're at the top of the pyramid, and what are they doing about it? Nothing. They're just sitting there like, I got here, and I don't even know myself what to do with myself anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, I can't tell you what they're thinking. One, I'm never going to be as powerful or as rich as any of these people, but like, they're so just disconnected from reality. And you're right. It's like, how much can I get? And you look at like the whole picture, right? And you really realize, okay, they really do want to kill off just the lower lower class system, right? Let's talk class war. They want that system gone. And they know that the middle class are the people who are keeping these lower class systems alive. We're the ones who are working the social services and nonprofit work. And, we're the ones doing all of the little things, feeding people, housing people. And they know the more they squeeze us, the less we're going to be able to do that.
Yep.
And so it is that gripping and that power grab of all of the wealth and all of the resources and just everything we can get our grubby little hands on, because I want everybody to come to me. I want everybody to come to my children and my grandchildren. They're the kings of this land. They have everything that everybody needs. They have the control. And I think it's this sickness that has built up in them. And it's like this is how they get their kicks, right? Like, there's a really big problem across America where we all have an addiction, like a dopamine addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I need my coffee. It gives me just like this dopamine boost, or, oh, I need to have this candy bar at 3:00 every day. Or, we all have these little things that give us this dopamine boost. And I think once you get to that spot at the top, like it becomes a whole nother story on how you have to get those addictive dopamine boosts. And this is, again, just a conspiracy of mine.
Yeah. I've had, as you were talking, addiction in my head. That's, when I'm saying why, it's got to be an addiction, a mental state of addiction.
Yeah. And addiction looks different to a lot of different people. And it has such a stigma, but most people have some addiction. I mean, that's just... And it doesn't affect everybody's lives the same. Like an alcohol addiction is not going to be the same as a coffee addiction. And you know what I mean? Like and I really think that we're looking at these people who have these addictions. And I mean, what the hell are we going to be able to do about it? You know what I mean? Like these people would pay off a psychologist to tell them they don't have an addiction. So
yeah. Boy,
it's interesting. I've got a note about looking at things through an addiction lens, and at the end here when we talk about 4th of July, that's something I'm going to bring up. Michelle, did you have anything on this public health and environment topic before we move on to Indiana stories?
I think the only thing that comes to mind, changing tone a little bit, is we lack an imagination for a future of abundance through positive environmental policy. For example, there's inventors that have been working on solar roads. I think they've been in place in other countries even. But this one story several years ago, I remember they were exploring it from the lens of putting them into parking lots that maybe schools would use, right? And so if you can imagine these solar panels that are robust enough that cars and trucks can drive on, except that they were also connected into some kind of a light source. And so the example that they gave was during the day when they used the example of a school. So they said during the day when the kids are there, they could program it so it would be a basketball or Foursquare or all these other different games that you would have, imagine like chalkboard games or whatever on the ground. But you have an event in the evening. Now you change the light pattern and it becomes parking spaces. And in the winter time, because it's solar, it doesn't need to be de-iced because it absorbs the heat. So it's always ready to go. Like that's the imagination that I feel like we're longing for. You think about the number of jobs that is just building and thinking and innovating. And instead we're locked into keeping legacy stuff in play, coal plants, things like that. And I don't know. I think that everything stays in this fear-based as opposed to a hope-based and a future forward. And the idea is if we told people we are committed to you so that you have education and employment and stability and housing and your neighborhood is going to be okay as we shift from old tech to new tech, I think people would buy in. But what we have is exploitative and expendable people. And so therefore, everything in our DNA tells us that whatever this new thing is, we're going to not be able to be part of it. we're going to just be either a cog in the wheel, or we're going to be ground into nothingness as this new future comes into play. I think there's a lot of concerns around AI with that regard. And so the challenge, though, really comes to if we are using our AI, Chat GPT, to do a whole bunch of things and then saying, but I don't want a data center, there's a hypocrisy in that. So we need to look at how do we effectively and in the best way possible embrace these new technologies without leaving people behind and without irreparable harm to our environment, so that our children and grandchildren actually can thrive.
Yeah,
Thank you,
one thing
Michelle.
on that, real quick, if I can, Scott, to wrap this up. One, I'd like to give a shout out to my friend Sean Grady. I happened to grab his shirt as I was got up this morning and moving around. So this environmental podcast, Environmental Transformation, and after he interviews folks, he just asks, how are you transforming the environment? And it's just like what Michelle was saying. Let's not miss out on this tremendous opportunity for the economy, for our lives, for jobs right now, to really lean into the environmental space, whether it's cleaning up old messes or creating new processes for avoiding things in the future, through solar or something like that. One example I give and was talking about this weekend is nearly every stream in Indiana is impacted by E. coli. We have a lot of data centers that want to come in, and we have this LEAP project many people in Indiana know about, up in the Lebanon area. Both of those very heavily intense use of water. And so we have streams with contaminants in it, and another company that in business sector that needs water, can in their cooling water through that process clean the E. coli from the stream and provide benefit on both sides. Oh, that would be so expensive. Well, as a business, your CEO took home $250 million in bonus last year. I'm pretty sure for 200 million a year. So your CEO still gets 50 million on the year as a bonus. We're not talking about his salary, but we'll take that 200 million. I bet we can put that to good use through environmental programs around your data centers.
That's going to be our job over the next several years, is to offer a positive vision to this fascist police state that we're currently living under. We have to give people something tangible they can grab onto to help us pull out of this. And I think incorporating environmental resilience into that is going to be a very important part of the equation. But for right now, let us move on to This Week in Indiana's headlines in a segment I like to call Around the Corn. So this week, July 1st, a bunch of new state laws took effect, including a ban on luxury cars paid for state officials with state money in response to some shenanigans by Micah Beckwith and Diego Morales. There's an increased speed limit on I-465. Also, the new law allows the state to make any interstate in Indiana into a toll road. Yet to see any changes there, but they now have that capacity. The transgender ban across Indiana sports in the high school and grade school ranks has been extended to college sports, where it should be noted less than 10 transgender athletes participated in the NCAA at all levels across the entire country. Folks who've had their weapons confiscated with through red flag laws now have an opportunity to have that expunged and get their weapons back. There are DEI rollbacks at educational institutions, state agencies, and professional license boards. College students can no longer use their college ID for voting. Counties, like my own in Monroe, where our sheriff has been butting heads with the state attorney general, counties are now required to cooperate with ICE when folks are brought into detention. The state of Indiana has banned lab-grown meat. School board elections are now partisan, and candidates can claim a party on the ballot. There is an elimination of state funding for public broadcasting. And finally, massive cuts to university degree programs, which we will spend a little more time on. And then the last thing I wanted to mention in state headlines, there is a new church in Indianapolis who this week it has come to light that they have been calling for death to the LGBTQ plus community in recent sermons, and it's definitely looking like one of these Westboro Baptist kind of congregations. Very extreme. Got to keep an eye on these folks. But I did want to get into those state university program cuts, and Michael, I'm going to let you lead that discussion, because that is the topic you wanted to look at here in Indiana news, and I will turn that over to you.
Well, yeah, myself and another House of Representatives candidate here in Indiana are sending our daughters off to be roommates at Indiana University. And yeah, for somebody, I went to Indiana University, and I've taught at Indiana University, and really to have them dabbling in the university programs, and kind of taking this step to where all the board members are now governor appointed, or even government appointed. I would argue, like, again, I don't want to appoint them either. Like, let the students, let the faculty, let the board, the people of the university vote in some of the alumni, somebody, but we don't need the government approving and appointing board members to universities. It's against everything the university needs to and wants to do. And, so I'm sending my child there, and it, like, at this last minute, do I pull the plug? Like, the whole last year has been going towards, like, convincing, your child, like, this is the right school for you, this is the right path. Of course there's always the backup, like, you can change it anytime, but pulling the plug here as they're going through orientation for their freshman year is tough. I hope that the faculty is able to rise up, fight anything, or the board maybe stays quiet. But I feel this is one of those incremental things, like where we are with refugees and immigration, where we take one step, and then it makes the next step a little easier, and then the next step a little easier. So yeah, I'm right in the middle of that controversy, and hope for the best. And I think we will pull her if the board or their values start being putting a thumb on professors before her 4 years are up.
Yeah, I pulled some quotes from an article that was in the Indiana Capitol Chronicle this week, just to add some details. And so this is not just IU that is affected. So 6 of Indiana's public colleges and universities are cutting or consolidating more than 400 academic degree programs. And that is ahead of a new state law that took effect this week, eliminating some not as popular majors and such. And there's going to be a lot of consolidating. So I guess nearly 1 in 5 programs will be eliminated, suspended, or merged across Ball State, Indiana State, IU, Ivy Tech, Purdue, and USI. Like you said, though, the bulk of the cuts were here at Indiana University, where 249 degree programs will be affected, 83 at Purdue, 51 at Ball State, Indiana State, 11, and then, just a few at Ivy Tech and ISU. Let me, I guess, give them the benefit of the doubt. I'll play devil's advocate here and say, okay, maybe there's some redundancy across the state. Maybe we don't need an engineering program at IU. If you want to study engineering in Indiana, you go to Purdue. You know, if you want to study uh, whatever, you know, you're going to study English lit. Well, maybe you don't need to do that at Purdue. That's more of an IU degree. Is there? I don't know. If you try to look at it with a sort of positive light, is it maybe like, okay, it kind of makes sense?
I think if I could just chime in real quickly, I think yes, there is consolidation and stuff, but I was talking to a student, a PhD student, and they're like, they were studying, what was it, astronomy, and the the way that they changed the degree program, they'd have to move into the mathematics department and go through physics with an astronomy emphasis, which is a completely different discipline. I mean, and at the end of the day, these advanced degrees, when you are going for to work in research and you're going to go and work in these environments, they're very specific on what they're needing, and I think to feel like, oh well, we're just, you know, plug and play and move things around, again, when you don't have it just feels a very top down approach. It feels like you're not getting the consent of the governed in this particular case.
Yeah.
The other red flag I do want to just name, though, is one of the trustees, the new trustees appointed to IU, James Bopp. He's one of the architects of Citizens United. And so, to me, just from an ethics perspective, I think about that decision, that single decision that the Supreme Court held, has been probably the most destructive to our nation. And so, just from a ideological perspective, someone who has no problem having unlimited money involved in politics would give me pause.
Yeah, but Bob is one of the most consequential attorneys, and he's a raging Christian nationalist. Very, very much one of the most important Hoosiers of the last 50 years that not enough people know about. Chelsea, you brought this one to the table here on our Indiana stories today. So, Union School Corporation, which we've talked about here before, state legislators have put Union on the chopping block. They passed they snuck this into the state budget bill to close this little school corporation without any input from the people there themselves. Is that what happened? Did I read that right?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. And I'm still every once in a while just slamming my hand down on a counter saying, God damn it. We've been fighting against this for years now. Union schools have been on the chopping block before. It's been talked about. So having it happen so quickly without a chance to even get the information out, which is our enemy, you know, not being able to get the information out, people being uneducated, that is our number one enemy. It was devastating. And I'm not even in Union Township. I'm not, but it's not far from me. And I do work there. I am friends with John Bartlett. He has run there in that district for State House. And he's very knowledgeable on what's going on. And so he really helped me understand a lot of it. And so this happened just like that. Nobody really knew that it was going to happen. JD Prescott, if you don't know who he is, I suggest looking him up because he is a waste of space in our State House. Now they're blaming.
That's the one with the Ralph Wiggum haircut. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You know, they're blaming bad test scores, right? So let's start there. When have we ever shut down a complete school corporation because of bad test scores? When have we done that? In the history of Indiana, when this happens, we come up with a plan. Those kids deserve an education. We're going to come up with a plan. This is how we're going to facilitate it. This is what we're going to do. These are the results. That's how we go about this. We don't shut down a school corporation. So first of all, that's something that you can look at. This has never been done in the history of Indiana. So, this sets a really bad precedent, which Indiana is really good at doing that. Another thing is that many of the school students have IEPs. So when we're talking about testing scores, it's the same thing with the iRead, right? Not every child is going to be on the same level. And by judging them based solely on their testing scores, you are doing a huge disservice, not just to that child, but every child in that school. I tested perfectly throughout school. If it was a multiple choice test, I had it aced. I knew I had it in the bag. But then other stuff I really struggled with, and people didn't know how to handle that. So she's fine. She tested well. So it goes in both ways. Children that test well don't always understand what they're really being tested on. And then children who don't test well, it could be a number of reasons why they're not testing well. And we have to get down to the bottom of that rather than just put them all in one group, right? So the thing with union schools is they have 7,500 students on the Indiana Digital Learning School. They bring in $3 million annually in oversight fees. So again, like we talked about before, this is about numbers. This is about the money. I don't have all of the answers as to where they want all of this money to go, but I know they want it to go somewhere other than the school corporation. And if you look at these, so if you compare Union Township to like Westfield, right? They're making the same median income. And so it's like they're taking advantage of this place where people have money, right? We've never seen that before. And people who don't have a lot of options as far as schools, they know that they can privatize schools in this area. And that's exactly what they're going to do. And I want to kind of bring up just charter schools in general before we move on, because all of this information is readily available online. I suggest looking it up. I suggest looking at the numbers, especially if you are in Union Township or in any of the areas surrounding that area, because this is something that's going to go like this. It's just going to kind of branch out, and they want it to sweep across Indiana. You need to be very aware of what charter schools are, what their regulations are and are not. They are not regulated by the state the same way that public schools are. There is a lack of oversight. And so are you wanting to send your children to schools where there isn't that oversight, where there isn't, they don't necessarily have to let you in on anything. You know what I mean? Like the public schools, they were all like, we need to see everything you're going to teach these kids, and we want to talk about it, and we want to do everything that we want to do to what you want to teach. They don't do that at charter schools and private schools. They're allowed to teach whatever they want. We had a charter school here in the Delaware County area that was completely fake. It was fake. They walked in one day and these kids are sitting on the floor doing nothing. They don't even have desks and chairs. And our state just throws money at them. So this is kind of a warning. I wanted to bring this up once again, because if you look into it and you follow the numbers, it is about money. It is about taking advantage of Hoosier families and Hoosier children. And you need to be ready for this to come to your area. And you need to know the facts and know what the numbers look like so that you can fight it and you can save your local school, because this is not the last time this is going to happen.
There was something I saw in that article, Chelsea, that stood out to me. So we mentioned the digital learning school, right? Their virtual charter. So I guess there are 2 districts in the state that have these virtual charter schools. One is Union, one is Clarksville. And the Clarksville schools also partner with a company called Stride. It was formerly like K-12 Inc. And the Clarksville one is run by a family with political influence. The superintendent at Clarksville schools is Tina Bennett, and her husband is Tony Bennett, not the singer. is a former state superintendent here in Indiana and in Florida, and he was also an executive at this charter company, Stride, before retiring in March. So there may be some shenanigans here with donors and well connected folks using their leverage to get something for themselves. We don't know yet, but it smells, you know?
Parents have power. We have power. Our state legislators, they want parents to have all the power, right? They want to legislate it. So parents, you have power. Do not let your children become pawns in a political game. This is not how we were meant to live. This is not how our children were meant to be educated. And we need to stick together. And if something stinks in your community, light a fire, smoke it out. We can do something about this. Unfortunately, the people in Union Township were unprepared and undereducated on what was happening. I think that we as activists and advocates, we really need to work on pushing information more so into these districts that we're so detached from. It is not going to be an easy job, but we need people who are willing to do it. We need it's like Mad Voters. I'm just going to bring Mad Voters up for a second because Mad Voters provides a lot of information that people in Indiana need and they're not really privy to without having to search for it. But then it's up to us to then spread that information and pass that information on. And so places like Mad Voters and just other organizations doing that work, you want to watch them. They're going to let you know about this stuff if they catch it. And then it's up to you to push it out to the superintendent or the principal or the director of your local library. You have to get them the information. You have to be a part of the solution.
I also want to do a shout out to the Indiana Coalition for Public Education, ICPE. They are on top of this as well.
Yes.
And Michelle, yeah, I wanted to ask you about this as a rural organizer. If this is something you see as a potential bridge across the rural-urban divide, because if you look at like IPS schools, they are under attack from the state the same way small rural districts are under attack from the state. And the one thing that these kind of districts typically have in common is poverty.
Yeah. Well, and I think the biggest misnomer that I seem to hear is when I talk to Republican legislators, they're very quick to say, the money follows the child. They don't invest in the buildings, they invest in the children type of thing, which is it sounds great, but it's not true. If me as a parent, if I want to educate my child and I can try homeschooling and I can try charters and I can try privates. But at the end of the day, if none of those work out, my child is still required to be educated. That public school in my district is required to accept my child. And so the infrastructure has to be there. And I think there's we don't talk about that. There are certain rural counties that do not have any private schools or any charters, and yet they are losing money because of how it gets siphoned out. So it's not that it goes, we think about, the $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 is in my child's backpack and wherever they go. That isn't how it works. I think at the end of the day, though, what worries me the most is that we are pitting parents against parents because we want the best education for our child, no matter how that works. Because again, like Chelsea's saying, every child learns differently. And so instead of as a state committing to the full spectrum of education, we've created a pie and then just keep adding multiple versions of education and diluting it rather than expanding the pie. So again, there are charter schools that are great options, but we don't have the oversight for that. So we need to commit to the oversight. Private schools can pick and choose who they want. And so if we're using vouchers for that, most of those families were never going to public school to begin with, had no plans on that. And furthermore, a private school can just raise their tuition so that the voucher money kind of supplements what they're doing, but they can still exclude people economically. And so
They
we
do.
need to be
Yeah.
looking at what are we doing with the funds that we have, and are they being used to the best? And even partnering back to what Michael said about solar schools. My gosh, if we had solar panels on these schools so that they weren't having to pay outrageous utility bills that are going up, then maybe they would have more funds for the buses. It's like we do not have a holistic approach in this state. It's short-term solutions that kick the can down the road for the next generation to pick up the tab, and we need to just stop that.
Yeah, and all the while the connected political donors get their kickbacks along the way, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to keep it with you here, Michelle, because this is another case of Republican policies hurting their rural base, and what you have brought here in Indiana is the potential of this big stupid bill to close a bunch of rural hospitals. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this came to light when actually they were in discussions. Congress was in discussions over the horrible, ugly bill, and the cuts to Medicaid. And so a letter was written by some of the senators, basically saying that with these cuts, they had a whole list of hospitals across the U.S. that were at risk of closure, and in that were 12 Indiana hospitals that were listed. And again, these are in our rural spaces, and so for many people, if they're seeing that their hospital is going to be closed, they're going to be having to travel multiple hours to get to the nearest hospital. And so I just want to put it in the framework around a medical emergency. You have a stroke, you have minutes to get to healthcare that's not going to be catastrophic. A heart attack, maternity. We've already had OBGYN units close, even more so. So we're creating a very a bad environment for healthcare automatically on top of everything else. The other thing I just want to name too is like these hospitals serve as critical access points, but also major employers to our rural communities. So when they close, those jobs also close, and many times there aren't other major employers like that, at least with those types of incomes.
Schools and hospitals.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. And then it also is just about, again, worsening our health, worsening our economic outcomes in these environments. I just want to name, so the Rural Health, they published a report, and they were talking about, kind of in quotes here, Medicaid plays an outsized role in rural America, covering a larger share of children and adults in rural communities than in urban ones. Again, when our urban brothers and sisters kind of get forgotten and their voices aren't heard, we forget the impact that is happening there, and we forget how connected we are. Also, nearly half of all children and 1 in 5 adults in small towns and rural areas rely on Medicaid for their health insurance. Again, I've heard prominent Republican legislators go, well, we're only going to begin, we're going to make sure that the people who really need Medicaid are on that. And if they don't qualify, that there are other ways of them getting health care. Well, guess what? They're also cutting the Affordable Care Act. So once those two things are gone, now what are we left with? Well, now we're left with employer health care. Well, how many jobs in small towns actually have benefits that include employer health care? Most of them do not.
Yep.
Most of those jobs are service industry, and they're part-time, or they're just under the hours required. And so it is a lack of commitment to healthcare. I have sat with legislators and talked to them going, are we interested in healthcare and providing healthcare for people? Or are we looking at the money aspect? Now, I respect that we want to save money, and you can save money by, I don't know, maybe not doing quarterly reporting so that you have paperwork churn, or actually looking at the whole framework where, I will give credit to Governor Braun for, and they passed that HB 1004, which was the law that would strip charity hospitals, if they're of their nonprofit status, if they're continuing to charge high prices. So we have nonprofit hospitals that have in their bank accounts huge sums of money, and yet they're still crying pauper. That's not fair. And I think we need to give credit where credit is due, give the oversight that we need to. But if we're going to end up risking some of our rural hospitals to save some money on one end, it's going to just explode costs at the other. Because can you imagine, like, I live in Bloomington, so we have a hospital here. If all of the neighboring rural hospitals went down, suddenly our ER is going to be filled. And so the beds aren't going to be there. And Medicaid patients, if they cannot get access to preventative care, they're only going to go to the ER. And again, I'm back to, it makes no fiscal sense to me. It makes no fiscal sense. We have got to hold these legislators accountable. That's all I can say.
I want to say something that's really quick. For anybody who is watching who is comfortable, your hospital isn't closing, and so this doesn't affect you. Okay, so what's going to happen? Because here's the thing: when you come into the emergency room, they're not going to go, okay, Mrs. Smith, you actually live over here on 8th Street, so we're going to see you first because you live close to the hospital. They're not going to do that. They're going to see you in the time that you come in. So if you've got a bunch of people come in from outside your area to use the hospital, and you come in with a wound, or, your kid's really sick and throwing up, and there's a lot of sicknesses with kids that they have very little time. Like, they need to be seen right then. Like, if you don't fight for these other kids to have access to medical care, your kid may end up dead because your kid couldn't receive the care in time. So you better get uncomfortable real quick with the idea that you're not going to receive care timely either.
So I also want to just say, like, we have Senator Chris Garten made a quote. This was back in March of 2025 when he was advocating for the HB 1004. He said, "It costs rural hospitals more to deliver care in these areas. That's just the reality. We also got to accept that if you live in rural Indiana, you have made that choice. Nobody forced you to move to rural Indiana where you are far away from a system, where you are in an area where it costs more to deliver care. There are choices to be made in this space." And all I could think about were the family farms, the generations that have lived there, that have been rooted there, and being told nobody forced you. Like, I'm sorry, we are committed to the state of Indiana. It is not just we're committed to this space or this zip code or this location or this economic bracket. We are committed to the state of Indiana. And what are we doing about it? And the sad thing is it's not going to age well for him, because back in 2024, this same Republican said, "There's a very long pipeline of integrated healthcare entities, top to bottom. This pipeline is wrought with, I think, a lot of opportunity to really improve the system, improve outcomes in the healthcare space, but also improve price as well. And I think we do that through free market principles and competition."
That
And
was
I'm
just
sorry.
for the
I'm
day.
sorry. That right there just summarizes what the Republican response is. It's all about making money. It's all about profit. It's all about centering the dollar and not centering people and not centering their health care. And we organize, we protest, but if people are not willing to translate all of that into electoral work to shape and change who's at our legislature, nothing's going to change. I have been to the state house so many times advocating for healthcare. I have protested. I have talked to legislators. You know what they listen to? Money and votes. And I have been told, unless we are bringing votes, it does not matter. So all of these protests that we're doing that have to happen, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So we need to be protesting. We need to be advocating, and we need to support candidates up and down the ballot that are committed to Hoosiers. And we show up and we vote and we get involved and we run for office. We do all the things. We can do all the things, people.
Michelle,
like
what
that you
did
brought
our
up.
wonderful senator say to end his coffee connections on Thursday? You remember that?
Oh, he said that if you don't like what I'm doing, if you don't approve what I'm doing, then just vote me out. Vote
Very
me out.
smugly, just vote me out.
And I will say that he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
But we live in a gerrymandered state where it is very difficult to just do that unless, and this is true, unless we actually get out, we do the precinct level work, and we're talking to our neighbors and we are letting them know the truth of all of these bills and the consequences of them, and they get involved.
Yeah.
Let's close out Indiana here by moving from the rural areas into the downtown of the state capital. So it's been a rough couple weeks in Indianapolis. There was a mass shooting last night in downtown, leaving 2 teens, a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old dead, and 5 others injured. This incident occurred around 1:30 in the morning after a fireworks showed. There were a bunch of unsupervised teens downtown in the area. IMPD Chief Chris Bailey scolded parents, saying, "We are not your children's keepers. You are." And Mayor Joe Hogsett announced a curfew for minors for the rest of the summer. And this follows last weekend's spate of gun violence, resulting in 7 people dead and 9 injured. Across 11 incidents. Now, I should note, despite these last couple really violent weekends, that homicides in Indianapolis are down this year. But, you know, the cops talk about parental responsibility, and Hogsett's putting a curfew in place. I don't see these folks offering a safe, inviting place for teens to go, right? And then additionally, the one thing I wanted to say is that, you know, the one thing in common about all these incidents is a gun. And we can't ignore the fact that we live in a country, and in particularly a state, where it's incredibly easy for anybody, including 15 and 16-year-olds, to get guns. And I just wanted to invite you guys to give any thoughts before we move on.
I just don't understand why people have an issue with gun safety. Like, I do not. I grew up with a mother who, I mean, I really thought that if I touched a gun, it would go off and kill me. Like, that's how she talked about guns. And so I was absolutely horrified by them. And the person that I ended up marrying, his family has guns. I told him I would not move in with him unless I learned about the guns. I knew how to use them. They were locked up at all times. And that's what we did. It was, and I now feel comfortable having a firearm in my home because I know it isn't accessible to everybody but me and my husband. Now, there are a lot of different things that you have to think about when it comes to guns: mental health, sobriety. And that is why it's like, even us, we are like absolutely safe about it, but there are still dangers. There are still dangers associated with that. You know what I mean? God forbid me or my husband become mentally unwell, you know? And so there comes a time where, let's say my husband is going through a deep, deep, deep depression and starts having suicidal ideations. Okay, so as a responsible gun owner, it is up to me to either change the safe number so that he cannot access the firearms, or to remove the firearms completely from the home. And it's like, people don't think about any of these little things. And I don't understand that. I don't understand what's so hard about locking a gun up. I don't understand what's so hard about, you know, keeping the bullets separate from the firearm. Like, there's things that we can do that are real little things that we can do to cut down on this. And I just don't get it.
Yeah, but I mean, you're talking about, you know, good gun safety protocol, right? And we don't make people go through that. If you're going to go to get your driver's license and operate a potentially dangerous piece of machinery like a vehicle, you have to go to the state, to the BMV, and prove proficiency, that you know how this thing is supposed to work, both theoretically and in practice. You know, for guns, that isn't there. And it just goes along with everything we've been talking about. Republican policy, freedom, 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 freedom. Really just means you're on your own.
Yeah, and I don't think like these weekend incidents are going to be solved through home care for your weapon. Right? These guys, whatever was going on, was probably there. Whether we regulated guns or not, they're probably going to have them. But because we don't, it gets really easy to carry a gun, and people think almost to the effect that like I should be, it's my right. And I don't need a permit, so I really probably just should carry a gun with me because that's,
everyone else has one. You need to, right?
Yeah. So then it's there at 1:30 in the morning, and we all know. I mean, I've spent many nights out, and I've spent many nights working. But after midnight or after 1, it's like, especially in the core of downtown Indianapolis, this, and I don't know if this happened. The latest was like right in the core, right?
Yeah. It was like Washington and Illinois or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very much right downtown.
They're not going to be able to police every alleyway around the city, but in the core, it's like, again, funding the proper level of not a police state, but community patrols to where more of these officers are knowing the constituents of their communities and vice versa. They know the police names, and again, you start to have a more of a sense of community between the police and the community and all the other entities. So, I mean, obviously, it's not a simple answer, and I'm sure if anytime we talk politics, people jump right on us. I have a thread going where somebody, you want to take classes for gun safety? What else do you want me to take classes for? How to eat? Like, oh, come on! Like, can we have a serious discussion here? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong. I would be willing, and it would be really controversial, and I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but I'd be willing to consider bringing weapons or guns back into schools where they used to teach safety, if that helped teach safety, right? Like, kids would have to know how these things worked and operated and their dangers. And again, we don't teach them anything about the dangers, but we sure show them a lot on shooting games to where they have this false sense of that it's an arcade game to carry this thing around. And then, that wasn't an arcade person you just shot at. That was a real person, and the consequences much worse.
Really, another thing that really grates me about this and the blaming the parents and whatever. And again, obviously there's parental responsibility, but like, how many of these kids, their parents are probably out working like a second or third job in this godforsaken economy, and they can't be with their kids at all times of day. We don't give people the support, the ability to just, be comfortable and spend time with their kids, and you wind up with stuff like
that. Let's go to the source. It's the lack of access, right? So parents don't have access to their children because they're working their asses off. Children don't have access to safe activities. We have taken so many of the activities that we've offered children over the years, and they're just gone. It's gone. We were meant to live as a community. And in America, we don't do that anymore. And I have an understanding that America is a very, very large place. So getting us to come together is harder, but we have to start on a local level. And as a community, we have to make a decision. Okay, I'm tired of this shit. I'm tired of kids dying in the street. I'm tired of wondering if a bullet's going to come through my wall and hit me or one of my family members. We have to say enough is enough. And we have to come together as a community and have community projects. We need to, as a community, go to local legislation, whether it's the city, county council, whether it's the state house, and we need to have a plan set. Hey, this is what we came up with as a community. This is what we would like to see implemented, and we would like your help doing it. We look to people in power like they have all the answers. They don't know shit. They are just regular people like you and me. Michelle and Michael have both run for office. You guys know we are all just regular people trying to do the best that we can. And it takes a lot of people to come up with solutions. It doesn't just come from one person. I can't get up there and have the solution to all of these problems as myself because I'm not the community. So it is up to us to come up with answers to some of these problems and then to look for the sources of power that can help us get there. Nobody is coming to save us. This has to start with us, and it has to be a push all together. And we have to go to the source. Parents are overworked. Programs are underfunded. Children are underinvested in, period.
Yeah, violence and crime are downstream of the rest of the culture.
Right.
And one slip up of the topics we talked about up here, and now you're fighting for your life, and that feels like maybe the only way out.
Yeah. And I do want to just also name that these two, this age group, first off, their entire life has been having active shooter drills at school. They, how old were they during COVID? That was such a disruptive. Well, I mean, we have adults that are still grappling with that, and we have not actually addressed what children experienced. And we have such a pro-gun culture to where it's like a rite of passage or something. I don't know how these kids think about it, but it's an unhealthy relationship. And so because we do not have that village that Chelsea's talking about, what also just even in these highlights about, having a curfew. Okay, so a kid's out there and they're out past curfew. Oh, now they're arrested. See, we're already now in the incarceration or the family separation. So everything comes back to a punitive and not an investment and a supportive environment, which means that the things that are happening stay in the shadows because parents do not feel safe to bring concerns out. Children do not feel safe to share their concerns. We just need to change the framework around that and support the communities that are actively investing in this. And I know Indianapolis, there's lots of groups there that are actively working in this regard. And I think that, it is their leadership that needs to be listened to, and not necessarily a bunch of politicians.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So I did want to move on to our last thing today, our one big thing, and we're gonna, stay on the topic of popping off explosives because it is Independence Day weekend, and in Trump's second regime, in the America we find ourselves in now, boy, the 4th of July does not feel like a moment for celebration. Let me get personal and tell you a little story here. So, my son passed away about a year and a half ago. He was 19. He would be 21 here at the end of this month. And the family and his friends were still going to get together on that day. And we're going to remember him. And we're going to talk about him and how much we loved him. And it is a birthday, but it is a somber, mournful birthday. And I kind of feel the same way about our country this weekend. Anybody else?
Yeah.
It was a great time to protest and exercise the right that people have fought for. And we come together of like-minded people, and we do celebrate being together again and having this opportunity. We want to fight to keep that opportunity. And it's one of these slippery slopes, particularly through the immigration detainment centers, that could easily be stepped up to any protester, not just any person with brown skin or any protester with a tan, which by being out protesting, I'm starting to get a little color in my face. So I got to watch out. But in my engagement in politics and in kind of this civil action has been pretty recent, and it's pretty empowering, and it's a great way to celebrate the country. I was telling people this week I didn't serve in the military. I, in hindsight, wish I would have at least served. I didn't necessarily want to go to war or anything like that, but I think an act of service is important. I think it might put some value into people's minds and into their lives of what we're fighting for. If more people had to serve as a kind of a requirement of the government, and that could be in many different ways. Doesn't have to be fighting.
Yeah, that's something like Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg has brought up on several occasions, like some
many
sort of
countries do it,
community service. Yeah.
So along the lines of Independence Day, so celebrate together, fight together, do things together, bring your family together, because that's the root of our networks. And hopefully you've had a good weekend. I have at least enjoyed some time away from work.
Yeah, Michelle, you said that the United States has become like zombie ants. What do you mean by that?
Oh yeah. So I had read an article about this parasitic fungus that ants will get infected by, particularly carpenter ants. And apparently what it does is it will, whenever an ant gets in contact with this fungus, the spore attaches itself to the ant and then begins to drill into the ant's exoskeleton. And eventually, once it's past that, it starts to feed on the ant's insides and eventually controls the ant. And so instead of being in the ant colony and doing whatever, it's the ant starts to operate and move, starts outside of that. And eventually, as this fungus grows, the ant crawls up into a tree or grabs hold of a branch, and then the fungus just takes over the whole ant. And the ant is technically dead, but still operating and functioning as this host. And there's times where I start to look around at how America is. And even I remember when Elon Musk was talking about how easy it was to get past some of the checks and balances of the government with Doge, and that it reminded me almost of that M&M shell where you've got the hard shell, but once you got in, he was like, actually, America is very much rooted in trust. So many things are trust, right?
Yeah, norms. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that was the thing where it's like we've had that shield, that trust shield, penetrated by really this fungus of greed, I would say. And so what's happening is people are operating almost like these zombie ants, where they're going through the motions of something and you're sitting going, this doesn't even make sense. Like you're absolutely harming not only yourself but the country, and for what? And I do think it is like this, the fungus is like that analogy. And so this 4th of July again was difficult to celebrate on the one hand, and yet at my house, my brother is we call him Uncle Boom because he loves fireworks and he just does great with them. And so we were having our own backyard fireworks display, but we noticed, like, for the first time in years, several other backyards were doing it as well. And so when they would have big ones, we'd all cheer. And then when we'd have a big one, they'd all cheer. And there was something magical about that. And I'm going, okay, we need those reminders of who we are, because what we're being told by the media and shown are basically the zombie ants. But that's not who we are. We have to remember who we are. And it happens in the smallest of ways. Kind of like the ants, it's the rhythm and the routine of actively living, of actively being grounded and rooted in our humanity. And I think that that's where we're at in America. I have every faith that we will persevere through this. I just don't know what it's going to look like. My hope, though, is kind of going back to the healthcare thing. We're probably closer to universal healthcare now than we ever have been. And that's simply because when things get burned down to the ashes, what can we
Yeah.
rebuild? And I think for those of us that are forward thinking, we need to start actually dreaming and imagining and proclaiming what we want to build, and not be so focused on the destruction.
Yeah. Chelsea, on this week where our Congress has delivered to our president a bill essentially codifying a fascist police state. How do you feel being an American on this 4th of July?
I'm embarrassed, honestly. And I think that you're going to get a couple of different, like, people who are in the know. It's like kind of what Michelle and Michael said. It's kind of a reminder of, hey, we are Americans. We do still have our freedom to get together and have fun and do this. For me, I've never been a huge fan of Independence Day. I really dislike fireworks. I think it's incredibly dangerous and stupid. And no offense to anybody, that's just my opinion as somebody who has seen the damage that it can cause and the death and the toll it takes on people. And so I'm just not a fan of it in general. I am a fan of getting together anytime the feeling strikes you. This year, our family did not celebrate. I lit some candles with intention, kind of as a means for me to just take a somber minute and, celebrate my ability to be with my family and still have the freedoms that I have. But I needed this quiet moment for myself. As an advocate and as an activist and as somebody who puts themselves out there, I have a lot of struggles. I think that all of us are struggling quietly, behind closed doors. And so this is something that I'm still struggling with. Ever since November, I've had a lot of ups and downs. And there are times like this where I think that I just need to be with myself and remind myself what I'm fighting for, but also remind myself that it is incredibly important for me to take these moments of silence, these moments of putting intention out into the world in a way that makes me gain some of my power back. We don't always have to be on it. We don't always have to be the loudest person in the room. We don't always have to be the face of a cause. And we need to remind ourselves that, and to just take time for ourselves and to let ourselves feel the feelings. I felt embarrassment. I felt shame. But then I also felt power in my peace that I gave myself. So just a bit of a different way of celebrating this weekend. And my entire family, it was very somber for all of us.
That I recognize that embarrassment and that shame, and it comes from a place of love, though, right? I think about how a lot of folks on the right will say about liberals and leftists that we don't love America, right? Because we reject the empty jingoistic flag waving and the fireworks and the monster trucks and the screaming eagles and all the symbolism that you think of. But we do love America, and if we didn't, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. We wouldn't be doing what we do. We wouldn't organize. We wouldn't serve. We wouldn't run for office. We wouldn't try to make America better. And I think of it like this: America is addicted to white supremacy and addicted to continued capitalist extraction. And these MAGA folks, these folks on the right, think to love America is to keep giving her another hit, right? But she needs rehab, right? We've tried rehab before, right? Like Reconstruction was rehab, and she went for a few years and seemed like she was doing better, and then fell back into a 60, 80-year bender, right? We went through the civil rights movement. We went through another rehab, and it looked like things were doing better, but that addiction to white supremacy and greed is always right there under the surface. And right now, I feel like we're watching our loved one kill themselves slowly, and there's not much we can do about it. But to love her and to be there for her, to catch her when it gets bad, but you can't keep giving her another hit.
Yeah.
Good way.
That's a good way to put it.
So I guess that's where we're going to leave things today. I did want to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk about what they're up to and where folks can find you online, your website, your social media handles, or whatever. And I'm going to start right below me with Chelsea. Where can folks find out about you, Civic Impact Network, maybe help out with the soup kitchen there that you're leading these days?
Yeah, so right now we are really trying to focus on small acts that we can do together that build up to something big. Everybody has something to offer. At Civic Impact Network, we really try to help you find what it is that you can do in hopes that it will empower you to do more. Like I've said before on this talk, a lot of people are dealing with a lot of big feelings, feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, and being able to help people with some of these small acts, I think, can help us build up to bigger things. So we actually took a little bit of a summer break and now we're back. I would suggest following us on Facebook. That's a very localized way of reaching people with the events. We also have a website, civicimpactnetwork.org. Right now, like I said, we're really focusing locally, giving people kind of a chance to see what it's like to live a different life. Soup Kitchen, Second Harvest Food Bank. These are places where you can build big community with people who care the way that you do. And it doesn't put so much pressure on you to be the entire change, right? You can make little steps and we'll get there together. And that's what we're all about. And we invite everybody to do the same thing.
Thank you, Chelsea. Michael, I wanted to ask you about your campaign, where folks can help you, maybe donate, volunteer, and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you. So I got my little sign here, and that's my actual house district. It looks like a duck. So you often see me out in duck things, whether I'm out protesting or campaigning or maybe just having fun with my kids. So I'm running for House District 47 in Indiana. My wife is also running for the Democratic nomination for Secretary of State. And you can find me at friendsofmichaelpotter.com.
Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate it. Michelle Higgs, close us out, please, today. Tell us about the Indiana Rural Summit, Organizing Indiana, Summer of Solidarity. You got a lot on your plate.
All the things, yeah. So 3 different hats that I'm wearing, kind of. Indiana Rural Summit, you can find out more information there at indianaruralsummit.org. Again, last year we organized 12 House candidates across 30 counties. We're going to be continuing that effort and expanding into the northern region for 2026. I'm part of organizingindiana.org. You find them on the web. That is actually a resource hub for people. So if you think about it, there's a lot of different organizations and groups doing amazing, amazing things. And yet within that are members who they need to be equipped to actually go between organizations and actually also into electoral campaigns. So it's reimagining how we create our kind of mycelium network within Indiana. And then on there, you would also find the Summer of Solidarity campaign. So when you go to the website, organizingindiana.org, at the top, you're going to see a tab called Summer of Solidarity. Go there. You can learn about the campaign, think of different ways that you can participate. And then lastly, I am running for House District 60 again. And so if you are interested in supporting my campaign, you can go to voteforomichellehiggs.com and learn a bit more about me there and join our efforts. House District 60 is Monroe, Morgan, Johnson counties. I kind of share a border with Michael Potter, so we do a lot of stuff together, which is cool. Yep, those are the three things that I'm passionate about right now.
And I just
Thank you,
want to say
Michelle.
just real quick about Michelle and Michael. I support both of these candidates. I've gotten to know them both personally, a little bit about their families. And I really suggest taking a look at their platforms and following along with them. I know that we're all feeling very like, standoffish when it comes to our candidates. We don't know who we can trust. Look into them, follow them, watch them. I know that Michael and Michelle have a lot to offer their districts. And so I very much encourage anybody who is watching to please pay attention to these candidates because they're doing more than things that's just for themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, we're just real people, regular people trying to do our best to make the world around us better. And these are the helpers that Mr. Rogers talked about, right? So I want to say thank you to all three of you, and thank you to you for sticking around for this extra packed, double stuffed, 50% extra Who's Left this week. We will be back next Sunday with a new panel. But until then, I have been Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.